Welcome everyone to the financial and estate planning portion of our reunion. I just wanted to start out and introduce myself as Megan Kopka, not only a presenter, but also a former family that was served by Inheritance of Hope. So shout out to Inheritance of Hope, preaching to the choir on what a great organization and wonderful legacy trip that we had. Both my family and I were served in 2011 at their New York City trip, and it definitely set us on a great trajectory to living a legacy together. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm a certified financial planner, so I always like to tell people, the best time to plan is when you're a young, independent adult, when you first start out in the world. The second best time to plan is right now. When you are a caregiver and a patient, just like husband and wife, you've been working together to build a family foundation, to build your financial future, and that part hasn't changed. It is best for you to continue that partnership and work together on your financial plan. And as Ben Franklin said, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Also, John Jay, another one of our forefathers, said, to hope for the best and prepare for the worst is a trite, but a good maxim. It is that we're all still full of hope, right? The inheritance of hope. However, we all know life has turned on a dime as well. It right now is a great time for you to look at your financial future and make sure that you have your ducks in a row. So today we're going to go over a few things. And what I have found being in the financial planning industry and also as a caregiver, that money is often avoided. I don't know why, but the topic seems to be avoided way too often because we need funds when our income has gone down. We need to be educated on what's best and how to utilize those resources and what is the order of operations for withdrawing from different types of accounts, and how do we keep a roof over our head and food on the table? So we're going to talk about just in general building and growing wealth, like the things we ought to be doing, but no one really seems to know about. We don't teach it in school. We're going to talk about some of the issues you're probably facing, what to do now, and then ultimately the steps to financial betterment, which is you're getting your budget together, organizing your financial paperwork, and then also understanding the estate documents. And we have Bill here to take over that portion. So pretty much what I tell everyone in financial planning, there's really 5 components to financial success. One is to make more money. The second is to spend less of your money. The third way is you can save on taxes. The fourth way is if you choose to invest differently. Or the fifth way, the least favorite, is change your goals. Change your lifestyle, change your goals. And for this group, I will also add another source of income might be grants. Okay, so when we're planning for the worst, it's hopefully while living for the best. And also at this point, when you're doing your plan, when you're going through your finances, you're leaving the best legacy for your spouse, for your children, by being involved and by taking care of things while you still can. So I just want to back up a minute here because one of the things I wanted to say about grants, my family was a recipient of several grants. So really there's no tricks to making money. I know a lot of people talk about kind of doubling down in the stock market and use words that sound more like gambling, and investing's really the long haul. It's something you should be doing for yourselves. But I did, like I said, want to talk about grants. There's no real tricks. So when you're looking for grants, what I did, how I found Inheritance of Hope, was I was Googling like crazy what can be done for young families. And I also found Friends of Man, which is an organization out of Colorado. I found the Clifton R. Lewis, the Good Life Foundation. They gave us a substantial grant for our handicap accessible van. There's also ALS Angels. And then there was an organization called Johnny and Friends, and that is a disability organization. When I first applied, they had a freeze. They didn't have enough funding. But when they released funding again, we got the call. So I would just really encourage you to go ahead and start writing grants. And you might want to ask friends and family to see if they can help do some research too. There are disease-specific grants, there are disability grants, all types of ways that you can search that. And I strongly encourage you to apply. Some of them are direct checks. The ALS Angels wrote us a check for $1,500. And I know in the grand scheme of things, for like a year of income, that doesn't seem significant, but that was our mortgage payment. So it does add up and it can be very, very helpful. So I encourage you to do that. As far as the planning for the worst, right now, you are in a really tough life transition, right? We're already in one. We already know that life can turn on a dime. And so getting both of you prepared at this point will help give peace of mind to each other, to your future self, and also your children. Making choices today, just get what best fits you for right now. We didn't have long-term care insurance. I wasn't even old enough to be considered to buy long-term care insurance when Keith was first diagnosed. However, after he was diagnosed in April of 2010, and I turned 35 in March of 2010. So at that point, I was old enough to purchase long-term care insurance. After his diagnosis, I went ahead and I bought long-term care insurance for myself, just because. Like, what are my risks? Well, I'm the primary caregiver and the breadwinner. So I increased my disability insurance, I increased my life insurance, and I bought myself long-term care insurance. So some of those policies I don't have anymore. I needed them at the time. So if that makes sense, you're going to cover your risks for now. I wanted to make sure that we mentioned healthcare insurance as well. We were covered through my plan at work, and I switched jobs. So even though I was the person that wasn't sick, that I was the caregiver, my carrying the healthcare insurance was job dependent. When I switched jobs, I went to a smaller firm where I could work part-time, which was not a possibility. So we make these life choices. And I made that choice around the time when Keith became eligible for Medicare. So health insurance can become a really big deal because it's the cornerstone of the insurances as far as for people. So I've had other patients and caregivers ask about accelerated death benefits. Some life insurance policies come with accelerated death benefits, which just means if you are diagnosed terminally ill, and your death is imminent within the next 6 months to sometimes 1 year, you can get up to half of the policy paid out to you now. You will likely get a 1099 payment or a 1099 form, but just know that life insurance proceeds are not taxed. It's not something that you put on your tax return. Another thing too, Keith's human resources department called because he had the $50,000 group policy, and it turned out that that was portable. When you have a group policy and if it's portable, you have to buy it as a whole life policy, which tends to be pretty expensive. In our case, pretty expensive meant $750, which was a lot of money. However, his life expectancy was 3 to 5 years to get $50,000. That might be my single best investment ever. So don't think that it's too expensive just because it's more expensive than a traditional term policy. So if you have a group policy through work, through your employer, make sure that you ask if that benefit can go with you when you leave work. Also, some people might be able to get mortgage protection, but watch out for this because When you're terminally ill, there is usually a terminally ill clause in life insurances in general. Another insurance to think about, like I had mentioned, is disability insurance. I increased my own. And for the purposes of planning, what you would want to know is if you had disability insurance through work, it will be taxed on your personal tax and income tax reporting. If you had a private disability policy that you paid for with your own money, your already taxed money, that disability insurance payment will come to you and you do not claim that on your taxes. And just a note here too, as far as your home and owner's insurance, your automobile policies, and possibly your liability policy, you might just want to check your deductible in case there's a hurricane or you're living in fire or flood regions. Can you meet your deductible? Do you have loss of use if you can't live in your home? That becomes extremely important. I know it would have been for me because we would have had to find a universally accessible place to live. And luckily, knock on wood, that was not our issue to bear at that time. Remember in general too, you really don't ever want to use your insurance. So when you're buying it, you're like, oh gosh, I'm never going to need this. No, you hope you never need that. And that never changes. I have health insurance today. I still hope I never get sick. I don't want to have to go into the doctor or the emergency room or anything like that. Just like we don't hope for another Hurricane Florence. Sorry, I'm in the Wilmington, North Carolina area. So that's, although 3 years ago, still pretty tragic and near and dear to me, because that was a whole bunch of work. You know, and then that brings me to another point. Money is one thing, but we all know that money doesn't necessarily fix problems. It definitely helps and can reduce the stress. And that's the mindset when you're pricing out insurances and the things that you need, that you're truly just trying to mitigate risk, a bigger cost that might happen in the future, and a cost that, again, hopefully you never need to use. At the bottom of the slide here, I just wrote something about my personal advocacy experience. We were told no a lot from our home health agency. So, and I knew that Medicare would cover some of the things that we were requesting, right? The care that my husband needed would be covered by Medicare. I could read that in black and white. And our home health care agency kept telling me no. I had to report them to the Quality Improvement Organization, and they come down and they pull 5 files, one of which was Keith's. And I had to do that 3 times. So just know that you can advocate as a patient or as a caregiver. Be an advocate for yourself, be an advocate for your spouse. If you're still running up against a barrier, there is an organization out of Connecticut called the Center for Medicare Advocacy. So if you're on Medicare, I highly recommend them. Very helpful, very knowledgeable law practice. It's a nonprofit, and there are attorneys on staff that specialize in Medicare. And it was a phenomenal resource for us. The other thing I'll suggest too, we had private insurance for a while. And when my late husband's beach wheelchair was declined, I thought, well, you know, I was the first one that our doctor had ever heard trying to get reimbursement for the $3,600 beach wheelchair, but we live at the coast and they put him in aqua therapy. He loved being in the pool. He's like, wow, Meg, if the pool was the world, I'd be normal again, because he could stand up and he could walk. And I thought, well, if they make the pool part of his therapeutic program and we live at the beach, then why wouldn't they get a beach wheelchair? And that's where I found out that you can call the insurance company when they deny a claim and request a peer-to-peer review. So those are kind of magic words. That means that a doctor at the healthcare insurance firm will reach out and talk to your primary doctor for whatever illness. Ours happened to be Dr. Bedlack, the neurologist for the ALS clinic at Duke. And he did a great job. So just empower your doctor and go ahead and ask for that peer-to-peer review. Okay, so slide 7 here. Sorry, just checking my notes, making sure I'm on track. All right. So part of today is to get to a financial place that's better than where you are today. A lot of people stress about finances, mainly because we're uncertain or don't know. So I'm going to help you with 3 easy steps today to get to financial betterment. We're going to establish a budget, right? The B word just came up. We're going to talk about getting organized. And then in that organization slide, we'll then skip into talking about the estate documents and then come back. How do you plan? Who writes financial plans? How do you implement a financial plan? And who's going to help you monitor that? So I had a home health upper management woman come in and sit at my dining room table and start a conversation about typically in Medicare, this is what happens. And I just stopped her right there and I said, typically, you're talking to someone over the age of 65. So we're not typical. This is not normal planning. So we're going to tackle the elephant in the room about how tough it is to die young, to think about our children in the future, and also at the same time, talk about money and how we can use money, right? Money is just a resource. It will not buy you better health necessarily. It does not buy us more time together, more time healthy as a family unit. And I'm so sorry. I'm sad for you because I know I've been there. But we need to kind of dispel that myth that you don't have to be wealthy to get your finances in a better situation. And if you look, this is a quote I love. True wealth is what money can't buy and death can't take away. So keep reminding yourself that you're building a legacy. You're taking care of the things that you can take care of when you still can. So our goals for today are that financial literacy and betterment. Our lifetime goals moving forward in the future might be to tackle not just the literacy, but also think about your own money values, your own life values. One of the things I value the most is motherhood. Another is education. So I have put both of my children through college. That is something that I value very, very highly. So that I would say is a lifetime goal is start exploring what your values are and make sure that your money aligns with that. And then also looking out for your long-term well-being. Okay, so life's not normal right now. We're out of balance. Things might seem a little bit out of control. So we're going to talk about, our feelings about money and also what we can do through a little financial literacy, which I think is empowerment. The first step to the financial betterment is to come up with a realistic spending plan. That's just fancy terminology with we're going to write a budget. And what is a budget? It's two things. It's assessing your income, what comes into your household, and also quantifying your expenses, what's going out of your household. That is a budget. So why should you write a budget? It will actually help decrease stress. You'll be able to make better decisions. So we really can't move forward in financial planning without understanding your cash flow. We need to know if you have too much or too little, or where are the expenses that might be able to be eliminated and the ones that must stay. So how much are you upside down by or have a surplus of? Should you and can you tap equity in your house? The budget is never a place for you to feel guilty. It's a place for you to understand planning and getting started in financial planning. So for those who have like the shortfall, you can think about tapping equity or refinancing or things like that. And I always tell people to do it afraid. Okay. If sometimes you get stuck, please feel free to email me. It's Megan@kopkafinancial.com. I will send you an Excel spreadsheet. It is a very robust list on what your household expenses might be, including even retirement contributions, and also your various sources of income. It will give you a template and help you kind of jog your memory of what's what. I always tell people to prepare to do their budget by making sure you have your username and passwords for your savings accounts and all the accounts that you have. Possibly get your checkbook register if you still are writing checks. Look at your bills. And also have your bank and credit card statements. A lot of times we set things up on auto draft. Like I know my Apple Pay, it's not that expensive. I think it's $2.99 a month, but it's part of my subscription. So overall, the things that I subscribe to, that along with Netflix is almost $20 a month. Now I can line item them individually, or I can just lump them together. I also tell people that they should round up their expenses and round down your income. So if you expect a bonus, try and be conservative. It's a more conservative approach. So that way you're kind of padding your budget there. And here's a list of possible income resources. Okay. We have work income, we have Social Security income, even dependent benefits through there. You might have the pension or annuities, maybe some family support or the GoFundMe, or even those grants that we had talked about. Think about if anyone wants to write in the chat, or we can go live to the Q&A. Think of any other suggestions you have that might not be on this list for where you're getting income. I know some people have taken in exchange students, and that comes with a small stipend. And then we have our assets and resources. So you might have IRAs or 401ks. The insurance policy, like I had mentioned, might have an accelerated death benefit, or if you have a permanent policy, there's cash value. There's also, like I said, the real estate, whether you can sell or downsize or use equity. There might be possible inheritance promises. So that's a possibility. Your business interests, and even your personal possessions. I have a client that recently sold through a secondhand auction a highly valued painting. She's like, I just don't enjoy it anymore. She didn't have to sell it, but she wanted to. And so you might have assets like that as well. So there's regular expenses that come on the budget sheet. Like I said, just email me. That's your house payment, your phone bill, the life insurance payments. Try and remember those annual and quarterly bills that come in. And then we're going to talk more realistically about what your household might look like, right? We have health bills, we have hospital bills, we have medical bills. So I just wrote down this list. Be a good advocate for your health bills. I would not say this about any other bill, but I learned probably the hard way how difficult it is when you pay a bill immediately that you didn't owe on to get that money back. So go ahead and let that bill sit for the 60 or 90 days. Wait until it comes in the yellow envelope, almost going to collections. Because a lot of times I've found, like when Keith went to a multidisciplinary ALS clinic, we would see 9 specialists and they would have different labs go to different places. And I had to call each one and ask them if they had billed through our insurance. You know, do you have the right information? Had I paid all those, it would have been more work for me to get funding and money back than to call them and ask them to resubmit and resubmit and resubmit. So that's the work I would suggest doing up front. And I normally wouldn't say don't pay your bills, but the healthcare bills are ones that you might let slide for a little bit. The peer-to-peer review, as I mentioned, quality improvement organization. The other thing that you might take a look at if insurance claims get denied, ask about the medical billing code, work with your insurance company along with whatever facility was doing the actual healthcare work. And finally, there is the ability to negotiate. The other thing, I don't know if you've looked into drug trials, they are typically free. I know Keith, my late husband, was involved in 3 drug trials. We did not pay for any of them. So that is a possibility as well. Those are definitely tough choices to make, at least they were for us. Again, the home refinance, pulling out some equity, not a traditional use, but might be a good idea now. If you have medical bills that are in the patient's name only, those are another thing that you might be able to hold off on. I always like to remind people too that they're economically, healthcare does not function in a sense of how our economy functions, right? There's no supply demand, there's no break-even point. If I was told I need a $5 million surgery tomorrow to be able to live another 5 years, I would go get that surgery. I don't have $5 million. That's what I mean about there's no break point. And the supply and demand curve don't meet in healthcare. And so we have these outrageous costs. So just really be a good advocate for yourself. And then finally, the other thing that you can get help with is having a list. When everyone calls and asks how they can help or what they can do to help, have that list ready to go. You can watch the children for me on October 17th at 4 p.m. because we're going to a medical appointment. Or you could drive, so-and-so to go get their blood drawn on this date and time. Again, other things, people are super helpful and they want to bake for you and cook for you. Having a meal definitely made and delivered is something that people can offer to help with. And also, I don't have to remind you, the unpaid caregiving costs are astronomical. We would have had to be very, very wealthy to have paid someone like me do the services and the things that I did for my late husband, right? Unpaid caregiving costs. So who else do you trust to come in and help you? Are there people who want to donate handyman services? I had a team of ladies that came in and helped me do spring cleaning because I was exhausted. 6 women in my house, all with their little specialty things that they like to clean the best. It was amazing. So definitely think of your friends and family and know that they like to help. This is another area where, again, during Q&A, if you offer any other suggestions, I'd be happy to add them to the list. Those are just a few of my ideas. Okay, and finally here, we talked about rounding up and rounding down, right? Round up on the expenses, round down on your income or bonuses, because that's a more conservative approach. Try and identify all those income and expenses and then adjust them as they change. I don't know about you, but we definitely had income changes and we had several. So Keith went from working full-time to working part-time at home to becoming Social Security disability income eligible and working to the maximum without hurting his Social Security payment, which was about $800 some at that time, to not working at all. And for me, I went from working full-time to working part-time. So our income was constantly changing. So being able to have the budget in place for where it is today and then decreasing it for what might happen in the future will be helpful. And then also just a reminder of don't forget quarterly or semi-annual or annual expenses. A lot of times those are your insurances or your car insurances. And remember that budgeting is a process. It's not there to shame you or for you to start being harsh with yourself and ruminate about how you wish you did things better or differently. It's a place for you to be aware and where you can and make decisions on where you can have impact. So you are at the center of your budget. You are the one who is making decisions and choices. So be sure to make your budget and take control. And next, I have this teeny tiny little document. Again, you can email me. This is a comprehensive list of what are important documents, important financial documents. You'll see on the top left of this list here on the slide is your budget worksheet. So, right, the budget is the #1 thing listed here under your cash management documents. But you're going to want to pull together all of your investment and retirement documents, your tax planning documents, have your education planning if you have 529 accounts or UTMAs. All these are considered important papers. Also, your estate planning, the copies of the will, the trust, the powers of attorney, the healthcare power of attorney, any deeds or assets. The title papers, all are very important. I also personally in a financial plan want to see a hard copy of beneficiary designations. I can't tell you how many ex-spouses, deceased people are listed without contingent beneficiaries. I also like to see statements, bank statements and brokerage statements. Even though I can link them in on financial planning software, I like to see them because sometimes in the titling, it will let me know if it's joint rights of survivorship, if there's a TOD, which stands for transfer on death, or a POD, which stands for payable on death. Those are things I actually physically like to see because titling is so important, and I'll defer to Bill on that. Another list of things, all those insurance planning documents that we talked about. Also your liabilities, your credit card statements, your mortgage statements, the loan statements, any personal loans you might have. And finally, your employment documents, because some people aren't utilizing all of the benefits that they have at work. So that's also an important line item for things to review. The real quick thing I will say about estate, you'll see my, I don't know if it's an acronym, but the letter TBD. So I always think of like to be determined. And what it stands for, how I teach, is titling, beneficiaries, documents, right? So in math, we had, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. That was our order of operations. When someone passes away, titling and beneficiaries, that's the top way that particular assets get passed. Anything that doesn't pass through titling or beneficiaries then goes through your will. Okay, so the documents are actually secondary to the way that you have things titled or beneficiaries listed. And with that, I am going to allow Bill to share his screen and I will be back.
Okay, thank you so much, Megan. I hope everyone can see my PowerPoint presentation here. So my name is Bill London. I'm a California licensed attorney, and I chair the Trust and Estate Department of our law firm here in Orange County, California. So it's my pleasure to give you an introduction to estate planning, hopefully make some of these legal terms a little bit more clear. And I think the first thing I want to mention is that this process can be intimidating, stressful, difficult. If you find a good person to work with, like Megan for financial planning, or a lawyer that you feel comfortable with, that explains things well to you, you understand them, they can make the process so much easier than we've had clients who come to us, they've tried to do it on their own, and they run into all types of problems. So if you have a good partner in the process, it can be a much easier process for you. And here we're going to start. So let's see, what is estate planning? Wouldn't that be a good place to start?
May I make a suggestion?
Please.
Will you go full screen?
Oh, can you not see my full screen?
I can see your screen. Just if you tap the little icon that looks like a book, then it'll open it all up. I don't know if you needed to see the notes or not, but.
Oh, you can see my notes as well. Okay.
No, you can't see the notes, but I'm just saying if you tap that little book or the one that looks like a movie screen, it'll be full screen.
Okay. Not quite seeing it, but are you able to see the presentation
Yeah,
enough?
you know what? Just go ahead. It's just you can see the left-hand side with all the next upcoming slides. So on the actual PowerPoint screen, not on Zoom, because we do see it, there's a little icon. The bottom right-hand side will say 80%. If you go over like two icons in the middle, it looks like a book. You see that?
No, I'm not seeing it on my end.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Just go right ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, maybe because I have it in the this mode here. Okay, so anyway, let me just put this all up at once. So what is estate planning? Well, in my mind, it's pretty simple. You're protecting, managing, and enjoying your assets during your lifetime while minimizing exposure to unnecessary taxes and liability. So for almost everyone out there, when you create an estate plan, you don't lose any control over your assets. You maintain complete control while you're alive and well. And only if something should happen to you, if you no longer have sufficient capacity to handle your assets, or upon death, does the estate plan come into effect. And your successor trustee or your power of attorney would come in to start helping. But until that time, you're in complete control for the typical family estate plan. And you can really be creative here. I mean, you can decide who should get what, on what conditions. You can have your family values built into this estate plan. It doesn't need to be a completely dry legalese document. And so I have a lot of clients who they would include a letter with their estate plan for their children to kind of pass on their values and wishes and goals for the family. I have to admit, the typical estate plan is maybe 100 pages in length. So it's rare that anybody, except for maybe the lawyer, would read it in its entirety. So sometimes having a separate letter on its own, just in plain English, can go a long way. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. So it can be surprising, but many people don't have an estate plan at all. So if you're feeling guilty at all for not having one, you're not alone. It's something that's very easy to put off. Most people don't like to think about it, no matter what situation they're in. But, and going back to what Megan said about financial planning, once you've done it, you have this peace of mind that at least you've addressed this issue. You've put some thought into it, you made your decisions, you've signed the documents, and now you can take a step back and relax a little bit because that's done. So here's an example for you. Let's see.
Bill, I don't have the slides advancing.
Oh, sorry, Megan.
The slides aren't advancing. We're still on the title page slide. Is that right?
No, okay, let me try this again here. Share screen, PowerPoint. Is that better? You should see a picture of Prince. Okay.
I see him.
All right, great. All right, so here we are. We have Prince, very wealthy. You would think that he would be able to find a ton of advisors for finances, for legal issues, very protective of his intellectual property associated with his music. But he never had a will or estate plan. So anyway, just trying to put a little personal touch here, or a face to the situation. This happens across the board to people. It's a easy thing to put off, and hopefully with my discussion today, you'll have a little better understanding and feel a little bit more comfortable. Here's some reasons why people don't plan, and maybe one of them applies to you. And you can think about which one applies to you, and I'm going to try to explain why each one is not a good excuse. So, first, I don't know who to trust. Well, I have a number of clients who are new immigrants to the country. I speak Mandarin Chinese fluently, and I serve a lot of clients who don't have relatives here, maybe don't have long-term friends in the country. And so one of the first things I point out to them is, well, you have a bigger need here. You need to give some thought as to who could be your trustee or who could be your child's guardian. And you don't have to tell me today, but maybe that's a goal that you should have if you're new to this country, or if you just don't have someone that you trust. It would be a goal, whether through your church or through your group of friends or reconnecting with family members that maybe you've lost touch with, to find someone that you feel you could trust. Because if you don't pick anyone, typically a court would decide who will be the power of attorney for your finances or healthcare, or the administrator of your estate. Okay. The second one, I'm not rich. Well, okay, but at the very least, you should have one document in a estate plan called a healthcare power of attorney. It's also called an advance healthcare directive. And everyone may have to deal with health issues at some point in time. So at the very least, you should have that. On top of that, you should also have a financial power of attorney, because even if you're not rich, I'll tell you, we have some clients who maybe they have a few small bank accounts, maybe they have a plot of land that they bought many years ago thinking it would be a good investment. And those can be some of the hardest assets to deal with if someone is sick or after death. The banks are wary to transfer accounts if there's no estate plan. And certainly trying to track down the location and get an appraisal for a lot of land, and then try to find a buyer for this lot, all while the property is outside of a trust, can be tremendously difficult, much more difficult than dealing with, say, a much more valuable asset that's been properly planned for. So this is a common refrain, I suppose, for Megan as well, not to use a financial planner or not to use an estate planner, but perhaps even all the more reason to get things planned so that you don't have any of these issues. Number three, goes without saying, no, nothing's promised to us in this world, and you just want to have your plan in place. You can't predict when something would happen. Same thing for I'm not old. I don't want to talk about my family. Yes, we have clients like this who, well, one of the joys of my profession is that I become almost a family counselor. I get to know the family very well. Hopefully they share all of their family secrets with me so I can best advise them on how to handle everything. Most of the lawyers in my field should have decent interpersonal skills, not the typical lawyer that you think of maybe in the movies or on TV where they're arguing in court and they're adversarial. Our field typically has lawyers that like to work with people, are approachable. So you should be able to find a lawyer like that in the trust and estate world. If you're single, all the more reason to have an estate plan, because it's not natural who should inherit after you. If you're married and you have kids, most state laws provide that your spouse and then your children are your natural heirs. But if you're single, you may have heirs that you perhaps don't want, or you may want to make provisions for certain family members or friends that would not be covered by the state intestate laws. Intestate laws are the laws that apply to your estate if you haven't done estate planning. Okay. Going to the second column here, I think it's too complicated. Well, it is complicated, but that's why you want help to do it. It's morbid to think about. Well, that's very true. Although I think that Megan would say regarding the budget, if it's something you try to block from your mind, that's not possible. It's going to creep into your mind from time to time. If you take care of it and you put it aside, then I think you can feel some peace. I don't want to spend the time is the next one. Well, we try to make the process fairly easy. From start to finish could be a few weeks, 3 weeks perhaps. And we don't have a lot of forms to fill out. Most of the consultation can be done over the phone. And then we prepare the plan, and then you would come in to review it and sign it. So all in, you're probably looking at just a few hours of time and over the course of a few weeks of a process. So really not too bad. I don't want to pay for it. This is one of the most common concerns. So we're here in California. I'd say a typical estate plan ranges from about $2,500 to $4,500 across the country. I know that can range even further, lower, and even higher. Problem is, if you don't have a plan, the estate and your family is going to be paying far greater of a fee, either to the court or to a lawyer who's going to administer your estate. The example I like to give here in California is if you have $1 million estate and you do estate planning, maybe you'll pay around $3,000 for the plan. If you don't do estate planning, your estate will be administered through a court process called probate. And for $1 million, you're typically looking at 10 times, perhaps even more, 10 times the fee of as compared to doing your own estate plan. So you can pay now or you can pay later, and it's much better to have control and to pay the lower fee. The last one's maybe the toughest one for me. I have some clients who, they say, after I'm gone, I'm going to let my kids sort it out. It's not my problem anymore. Well, yeah, I think these clients don't fully comprehend how difficult it can be with the court system, especially here in California, where we have a massive delays because of COVID, and you really have to get in line to go to court. It's not so simple that the family members can just come to an agreement and take care of it. No, they have to go through a whole court process here. It takes at least a year. It's expensive, as I mentioned. It's all public information. So if there's anyone in your family that you care about not having to go through all of that, you should do an estate plan. So. All right, and this is a little bit funny here, but this is what would happen. But I have a case like this right now, where unfortunately it's a family that not everyone got along very well, and the planning not done by our office. The planning was not done with a lot of foresight, let's say, and so we have, fortunately, a number of arguments going on. I compare it to a divorce, because contentious divorce, because there's money involved, there's a death, and people do strange things, especially if a parent is gone. They no longer have that kind of voice of reason or even conscience looking over them, and they maybe do things that they wouldn't normally do out of emotion, out of a feeling of being treated unfairly. And of course, without the parent involved, no one to really talk them out of it. So, okay, the goal is to avoid any problems after a passing. Okay. So I briefly referred to number one, intestate succession. So if you do nothing, it doesn't mean that all of your money goes to the state. I have a lot of clients who have that fear. It's not the case, only in very, very extreme cases where you have no family members, even distant relatives. But if you do nothing, the law of intestate succession applies. Intestate succession just refers to, for each state, they have decided, the legislature has decided who should be your closest relatives in the event you haven't prepared an estate plan. And sometimes that matches what a client would want in that situation. Oftentimes it does not match what a client would want. I never encourage a client to rely on this law. And I never want to have this even being the final contingent beneficiary provision of a trust. I always want the client to actually pick out who should be their beneficiaries. Number two, this is another common misconception. Many clients think, well, and I should preface this by saying the laws vary state to state. We have 50 states. I have a colleague from Russia who's an attorney, and he asked me very seriously, do you really have 50 different jurisdictions with 50 different sets of laws in your country? Because here in Russia, we just have one. And he found it shocking that we do, we have attorneys who are licensed in each state. If I have a client that approaches me and they live in New York, I cannot help them. I can only help California residents because each state has its own laws. Now, here in California, as well as many other, but not all other states, having a will alone is not enough. In fact, we strongly advise against simply having a will for one reason. The reason is a will is only effective if the will is administered through the court system called probate. Your will is not valid, it's not effective until the will is registered with the court, accepted by the court, and then an administrator is appointed and approved by the court, and the court oversees the administration of this will. Whereas with a trust, again in California and many other states, a trust will, in almost all cases, bypass the court system. So let me explain that. The California legislature has decided that if you have taken the time, typically with a lawyer, to set up a trust and you've made all of your decisions of who should get what, who should oversee the trust, well, the legislature says, well, we don't need to oversee the administration of your trust. We feel you have done enough preparation. So we're going to let you do it on your own. We're going to let your successor trustee handle everything on his or her own. Of course, if there are ever any problems you encounter, you can come into court for dispute resolution, clarification, etc., but you don't need to come to court. So because you don't need to come to court, everything remains private information. You can administer the trust a lot more quickly than having to wait in line in court. And of course, you don't have to pay the probate fees. So again, the moral of the story in most states, and you should consult with an attorney of your own state, but typically a trust is far better than simply having a will. Okay. Number three, this is very important as well. This might be one of the more important slides I share with you today. accounts with beneficiary designations. So you have life insurance, perhaps retirement accounts. You have bank accounts that could have payable on death, POD, or transfer on death, TOD beneficiaries, as Megan referred to. Believe it or not, your trust and will do not necessarily control all of your assets. In fact, and this is going back to Megan's acronym, the TBD, in fact, if you have beneficiary designations on any of these type of assets, those designations will control, no matter what your trust or will says. So let me give you an example. If you put in your trust, I want my $1 million life insurance policy to go to my kids, but you have not updated your beneficiary designation since your divorce, and your ex-spouse is named as beneficiary, by law, the ex-spouse will receive that asset, no matter what your trust says. That's really hard for people to maybe comprehend sometimes. I mean, it just makes sense that your trust or will would control everything. But the way I like to explain it is those accounts or policies, almost like a contract that you have with the life insurance company or the retirement plan administrator. You've signed the contract, you've stated who should get what, and that contract supersedes and was created before your trust typically. So that's going to have the control, and the company, life insurance company or retirement plan company, they're just going to follow the instructions that you gave them. So very important. Anytime we do estate planning, we always try to be very clear on this, and we want to gather all of the client's assets so that we know, what they have, and we make sure that everything's titled correctly. Okay, good. At number 4, this is kind of similar to number 3. If you have a piece of real estate, this is typically where you have joint tenancy. You have a piece of real estate and your joint tenants. Joint tenancy by law is when one tenant dies, the other tenant inherits the property without any questions, without having to go to probate, without having a trust, and no matter what the trust or the will says. So joint tenancy would control, just like a beneficiary designation. So I had a case like this when I first started out practicing 10 years ago. Pretty sad situation. A single mother, her husband had passed away, loaned money to her son, so her son and his wife could purchase a condo in Los Angeles. Of course, it was a family loan, so no documentation that it was a loan. There was some misunderstanding in the on behalf of the daughter-in-law as to whether it was a loan or a gift. So the son and his wife purchased a condo, and they purchased it as joint tenants. And then the son unfortunately passed away. And his mother asked for the money back. She said, well, that was a loan. I want to be repaid. This is my retirement money. And of course, the now widowed daughter-in-law said, well, no, I need this for my life. I have nothing else. Oh, by the way, it's joint tenancy, so I'm to inherit it. It should belong to me. Really unpleasant situation. We represented the daughter-in-law in the case, and unfortunately for the mother, the joint tenancy controlled. She didn't have any type of documentation, and a real unfortunate situation. But for our client, she got to keep the condo. So this is just all to say estate planning, you want to work with a professional who can alert you to these things. If you try to do it on your own, this is a common mistake that could be made. All right, and number 5, again, in most states, number 5 is the #1 solution. You have full control with a trust. You stay out of court, you save money, and typically when you do a trust, you work with an attorney so you avoid these problems. So we went over intestate succession. I'm going to just skip ahead here. Well, maybe I'll go back one. So another misconception we typically hear is, well, I have a trust. Do I also need a will? Yes, typically, if you have a trust, you should also have a will, and they work together. So how the heck does that happen? What does that mean? Well, let me explain it this way. When you set up a trust, you typically try to transfer as many assets as you can into this trust. And when you die, the trust will control all of those assets. However, not everyone will be successful in transferring all the assets. They may neglect to transfer some. They may do everything right when they set up the trust, but years later they acquire new assets and fail to transfer those into the trust at that time. You never know. So we always have a will as a backup device. And every will that we create when we have a trust, it's referred to as a pour over will, which means there is a provision in the will, the most important provision there, that says, when I die, any assets that belong to me or my estate should be poured over into my trust and distributed according to the terms of my trust. So again, typically, if you have a trust, you should also have a will, and the sole purpose of the will is to transfer any remaining assets into your trust at the time of your death. Also in California, another very important and common provision are guardians for minor children. So any minor children, that's before age 18 in California, they cannot make legal decisions for themselves. They cannot own assets for themselves. If you have a minor child and the parents are no longer here, a guardian would need to be appointed for them. So in your estate plan, you can nominate guardians. And by nominating, I mean you pick your preference as to who the guardian should be. What then happens is a court would review your nomination, and typically the court gives your preference a lot of deference, and they would just rely on your preference unless they find that the nominated person is fully unfit to serve as a guardian. If you don't nominate a guardian, then a family member or friend would have to apply to be a guardian, and the court would decide in the end who the guardian would be, and you have no say in the matter. So this can be one of the easiest things we do in the estate plan. It's just a couple lines long, but obviously it's very important if you have minor children. And of course, these documents can be updated at any time. So, you pick a trustee or a guardian now, and in the future, you could pick someone else if that person moves out of town, or if that person becomes very busy for any reason and they don't think that they could handle it anymore. In addition, you always would pick successor or backup trustees and guardians. So you have a list. Typically we recommend at least 3, where if the top choice can't perform, they can simply decline and the next person in line can step in. Okay, well, we talked about wills typically not being enough. I'm gonna move forward here. We talked about probate. Again, probate is the court process to administer your estate. If you don't have any estate planning, or if you simply have a will, your estate would need to go through probate, the court process. So we went over this, but again, it's court supervised. And I should also point out, it's not just upon a death. So if there's any period of incapacitation, for example, if someone is in a coma or they suffer from dementia or any other reason where they're unable to make decisions for themselves, you would also have to go to probate court, and a conservator would have to be appointed for the incapacitated person. Now, if you've done estate planning and you have your financial and healthcare powers of attorney in place, you can almost certainly avoid having to go to court for a conservatorship. Well, conservatorship's been in the news recently. We'll go from Prince to Britney Spears. This is a little bit of a unique case, but just to give you some color to it, her father applied for a conservatorship. I don't have all the details down, but years ago, because I think he felt that she was not making good decisions for herself. Most people think of conservatorships for people who are in a coma or completely incapacitated. Well, Britney Spears is performing or has been performing in Las Vegas and is functional in many regards, but maybe just not performing responsibly. And so her father was able to successfully get a conservatorship established. But if you've been following the tabloid news, which unfortunately I sometimes read, you'll see how much drama that involves and difficult it is to have everything made public among the family members. So, estate planning, avoiding the need to go to court, having your powers of attorney in place. Maybe it wouldn't have worked for Britney Spears' situation, but it works for many situations to just avoid the court process, avoid publicizing any family troubles. We talked about here in the COVID world, things are taking a lot longer. So before, I'd say about a year is a typical California probate if nothing goes wrong, if nobody challenges the process. If somebody challenges it, all bets are off. If you have a pandemic, things are going to take longer. And we've had cases, we've heard of cases going on for over 10 years because there's so much money and so much fighting, and people will appeal a judgment. And okay, so that's really extreme. But even for a straightforward probate case, it can easily take 2 years. And keep in mind, virtually all the assets are held up in the court process until all debts are paid, all expenses are paid, and then finally the court will approve distributions to family members. You don't have this with a trust. If you have a trust, your trustee, if they see that somebody needs money immediately, they can make an advance distribution, sometimes with notice to all the beneficiaries. Sometimes they can just do it on their own. There's so much more flexibility when you have a trust and you're outside the court and you don't need a judge to approve everything. We talked about the expense. Just kind of skip ahead here. And of course, it's public, as I mentioned. Okay. So, talking about incapacity now. And again, if you don't have proper planning, incapacity can lead you to court. If you do have proper planning with, again, the powers of attorney, you can, in many situations, avoid court, avoid the conservatorship. Okay. Here's just a brief mention of minor children again, or even grandchildren. We have clients who come in and say, well, our children are taken care of, but we're concerned about a grandchild. We're concerned that this grandchild may need a guardian, or we want to step in and maybe try to get the custody of the grandchild. Well, there are things that we can do in the estate plan, working together with the parents, hopefully, where we can have the grandparents become the nominated party, or at least prepare to apply as the nominated party if it's ever needed. Okay, so again, you would nominate a guardian and the court would approve and appoint the guardian. That's very important to note. If you don't nominate anyone, the court has no idea who you would want. If you do nominate someone, that person rises to the top of the list in the court's eyes, unless something's really wrong with that person, financially, or they have a criminal background, or they don't show up to court to report back. All those things put aside, they should receive the appointment by the court. Here's another issue with not having an estate plan. So by law in California and most other states, it could be 18, could be 21. Your child is going to inherit everything at this very, very young age, because now they are by law an adult. And what we see is if somebody inherits a ton of money at this age, they blow through it. What decision would you make when you're 18 if you got a huge inheritance? So I've never had anyone in a trust pick age 18 as the inheritance age. Maybe they would say half at 25, half at age 30, but never would they say all at age 18. So if you don't have an estate plan, by law, everything would go, at least in California, to your children at age 18. Again, joint tenancy, survivor takes all. It's a big problem. It's not what people expect sometimes. It could conflict with their plans. And there's nothing you can do once a joint tenant dies. Okay, just in the interest of time, going to move forward here. We've covered a number of these issues already. Okay. And now is the time to take control. What's the answer to all these problems? Every time a client comes to me and says, well, I don't know what to do. Should I do a will? Do I need estate planning? Okay. The answer is, if you have any type of assets, if you have family, at least in California and many other states, a trust is the answer. And certainly for any state, working with a qualified estate planning attorney to create an estate plan is the right decision. So let's talk about a really common tool, the revocable living trust. Revocable meaning you can change it at any time. You can revoke it, amend it, create a whole new one. Living, you create it while you're alive, and trust. So that's all that means. Okay. Well, trust can be a foreign concept to many people. In my mind, it's simply a document, and it's a contract, instructions for what to do in certain situations. And you have the three parties to this contract. You have the creators of the trust. That's you, creating the trust. You have the trustee of the trust. That's you as well. When you create it, you're the trustee and you're in full control. Of course, if something happens to you, your successor trustee, a family member or friend, would step in and follow the instructions in this document. And the third and final position is the beneficiary or beneficiaries. So while you're alive and well, you are the beneficiary. You receive all of the benefit of the trust assets. No one else but you benefits from the trust. And even when you're, if you're ever incapacitated, you remain the beneficiary, and your successor trustee needs to act in your best interest. Only once you've passed away do then the beneficiaries change to a spouse or then the children. But again, if you think about the concept of three positions, creators, trustees, and beneficiaries, and it's a contract with instructions of what to do with your assets, then you pretty much got the trust concept down. Oops. Okay, so again, you're going to transfer most of your assets into the trust so that when you're no longer able to manage the trust, your successor trustee can step in right away and handle your assets. And one common asset that is very important to fund into a trust is if you have any type of family business. If you don't have a trust, the family business is going to suffer because someone will have to go to court. And only once they go through the court process will they be able to have control over the business. And by that time, the business is really going to suffer with no one able to have the legal authorization to manage it. On the other hand, if you have a trust and you've transferred your business into the trust, your successor trustee on the very next day can hit the ground running and start to manage the business so it doesn't lose any value. Okay, again, with a trust, we avoid the probate process. Here are the positions: grantor, also called creator, or trustor. That's you, trustee, successor trustee, and beneficiaries. It's pretty straightforward. And you have complete control over inheritance. So you decide, do you have a child that's in a marriage that maybe is not the most healthy marriage, and you fear that it could potentially end soon, and you don't want the inheritance that your child receives to be divided in any potential future divorce? Well, there are protections that we can put in your trust to avoid that situation. Are any family members or children recipients of government benefits? Do they have special needs? Well, you don't want to just distribute money directly to them. You typically would want to have a special needs trust that would allow them to receive the inheritance, but not disqualify them from continued government support. It can be very crucial if you have any special needs children. I think I'm getting close to the allotted time here, so I'm just going to skip ahead. We talked about a durable power of attorney for assets. It's very important who will manage your assets in the event you're ever incapacitated. And they're called springing powers of attorney because they spring into action upon your incapacity. And then the advanced healthcare directive, again, making healthcare decisions for you in the event you cannot make them yourself. End of life decisions: do you want to be kept alive as long as possible and by artificial measures? Or if nothing can be done, do you want the plug to be pulled? Do you want to be let go peacefully? talked about. Revocable trust. So just a few additional points. Again, it's all about control. You really have a lot of flexibility when you plan ahead. Let's see here. So with all this flexibility and planning, you make your decisions and you have peace of mind. You don't have to think about it anymore. So again, on the left side, all potential problems with just doing a will or not doing planning. On the right side, all the benefits of having a trust in place. I just want to close by making a couple quick recommendations. One, self-help. I have to tell you very candidly, in my field, the lawyers make the most money cleaning up mistakes that people have made when they do a DIY or self-help estate planning option. After someone's passed away, trying to fix a document requires going to court, and it's very expensive. So much better to get it done right. And then another thing that clients can do that's a mistake would be to go to a general practice attorney. General practice attorney meaning they do a large variety of things. They do solemn estate planning. Well, they can miss some important things. They maybe don't know how to ask the right questions. They may not be familiar with this beneficiary designation issue, which we went over, which is very important. So my recommendation to you is you would want to find an attorney that focuses on estate planning. Perhaps they also do some real estate or business work for their estate planning clients like I do, but predominantly they practice in the estate planning field. Sure, you may have to pay a little bit more than DIY or doing it online, but this is obviously a very important document, and you're going to save a lot in the long run if you avoid any mistakes. So here we go. Here's a comprehensive estate plan would have these documents, and we can distribute these slides to attendees, but you're going to want to have detailed estate planning, which includes the trust, certification, declaration of intent, the will, Advanced Healthcare Directive. The HIPAA form allows your agents to access your private health information, medical information, so that they can make medical decisions for you. Anyway, any estate plan you do, if you're in a state that a trust is recommended, you should have all of these documents. So this is a good checklist to have when you go in with the lawyer to make sure that they're going to do all of these for you. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, and I hope that that was a good overview to the estate planning process. I'm going to turn it back to Megan, and she's going to continue with her presentation.
Well done, Bill. Thank you so much. I do want to just mention too and personalize, I changed guardians for my children 4 times. One time when I felt like they were old enough to make a choice. We had an aunt and uncle assigned, and both of them were like, what? We thought we'd go to grandma and grandpa. And so Keith and I made that change. And about, I suppose probably 18 months later was when he became terminally ill. And after he passed away, my daughter was in high school. So sending her up to Ohio, 700 miles away, didn't seem to make any sense anymore. And then one person got divorced. So I thought, well, I really want him with a family. Went to someone else. And so there's reasons. I always say things aren't written in stone until it's your epitaph. So make the best choices that you can today, because you can always go back and change them. That's what I would advise. And also, like you said about the minor children too, minor children cannot transact and they cannot manage money. right? So that slide that you had was very, very impactful. I always tell people, do not put your children as contingent beneficiaries if they are under the age of 18. That is where you would put the estate of Megan Kopka, right? So I have a trust. So mine would say Megan Kopka Revocable Trust. That is the name of the trust. So that's very, very important and powerful information. And I really liked, you said, we gather all the assets. So I quickly am going to share my screen here. And this is when you do a financial plan, you should be able to have a balance sheet. So if you just take a look at this, and don't worry, there might be a Frank and Joanna Miller out there somewhere, but this is a sample that comes embedded in the financial planning software that I use. So you can just look through here, like what's listed under Frank's name? Well, Frank has a $441,000 401k. Of course, that's in his name only. Retirement accounts can only be in one person's name, right? And so Joanna's got a $143,000 403b. That's her retirement account. IRAs, I stands for individual. So of course she owns her own Roth IRA. But look at what they own jointly together. They have some sort of cash account at $25,000 with joint rights of survivorship. They have an investment account at $363,000, and then their house is valued at $850,000 that they own together. However, Joanna owns a mountain house on her own. So this is what we mean, like the titling really does matter. What is joint rights of survivorship? When you go through financial planning, Bill, you'll probably love seeing my clients because I have them take this into their state attorney. So they really do see. And the possibility of Frank putting his 401k beneficiary as the trust, Joanna and Frank Miller's trust, may or may not be a good idea. Spouses usually put each other as beneficiaries on retirement accounts because there are special provisions. The contingent beneficiary, should your spouse pass away before you, then you'd name your contingent beneficiary as your trust. All right, real quick, I'm going to just close up here. I'm going to share my screen again, right where we left off. Okay, so we're getting organized. Well, what do we do with all these important documents? As you can see, this is the backbone for a financial plan. So you want to get your budget together. You want to get all of your important documents together. And then what? Do we play 52 pickup? No, we get them to a financial advisor. And Bill brought up, some really good excuses that people tell themselves of, I don't know who to trust. Well, we'll take a look at that real quick. Okay, so I like to describe myself as my business does two things. I do financial planning, which means you get a written document, which is an assessment of where you are today and what I think you need to do moving forward. You can address any questions or concerns you have, but you'll also get an overall view on what you're doing well for yourself and what are other areas of opportunity. It also helps you plan towards a goal. And even if you don't have a goal right now, it'll help you get through those life transitions together. So that's one side, which is a financial plan. The other thing that my firm offers is investment management. I help people pick the type of accounts that they need, whether it's 529 accounts for college funding, a retirement account, if they have a trust account, or if it's owned individually. Types of accounts are very important because they get taxed different ways. We don't expect everyone to know that. That's my job, right? I've been planning and educating myself and researching and accessing resources for a long time to learn how accounts work together with everything else in the financial plan, including your tax situation. We also select investments and investment managements, whether that's mutual funds or exchange traded funds or stocks or bonds. So what goes in those particular types of accounts is something an investment manager would do. We also assess your risk tolerance. Some advisors will create an investment policy statement. That's just fancy to say, I have this account, it's earmarked for retirement. My retirement date is in 25 years, right? So we're doing a long-term growth type of account. The investment policy statement would list all of that. And then investment management offers the trading and also tracking and managing. So delve a little deeper. How do I pick a financial planner? How would I find someone who does that? The gold standard in the industry is a certified financial planner. So go to the CFP board is actually a nonprofit, and they are, like I said, the gold standard. They have higher education. There's an ethical component. And just to put it in perspective, there's about 89,000 CFPs that you have access to. So go on I think it's makeaplan.org, and you can look up who's close in your area. The second place I would say, if you want to really delve deep, the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors is another organization. There are about 3,500 NAPFA advisors. So you're taking your pool of 89,000 down to 3,500. Not all CFPs write plans, right? You can be an insurance person and be a CFP and just sell one product. So not all CFPs write plans. NAPFA, I'd be really surprised if NAPFA advisors, if there were any that weren't writing plans. All right, so what is financial planning? It begins with that understanding of who you are. When you pick a financial planner, I would ask, do you work with families like us? What has been your experience? The next part is a financial planner should have a contract. This sets up all of the rules of engagement of what you're going to get as far as a financial plan goes. That is what do I have to do? What are you going to do for me? What is the timeline? And also, very important, what is the cost, right? Bill referenced that cost is sometimes something that keeps us away from from moving forward with what we know is probably in our best interest. Financial planning, if you look at this last bullet point, on average, a financial plan takes about 30 hours to put together. Someone is spending a lot of time with you. If we are professionals making $200 an hour, a financial plan costs $6,000. So put that in perspective. My financial plans range from $3,000 to $7,000. Are you like, oh my gosh, I can't afford that? Or also know CFP board and also NAPFA sometimes sponsor free plans, right? So you can reach out to those organizations and find out if there are people in your area that would offer to write a financial plan and give you some advice. I always like to caution too, you do get what you pay for, but hopefully because the standards are so high in both organizations, you won't have to be so cynical or skeptical of what you're getting. And I think it's better when you have your budget and paperwork organized to go ahead and take that next step and get the financial advice. The next part is investment management. This is like when you have that term wealth manager. Well, a financial advisor and wealth manager can be the same thing. But here's what investment management is like. Investment management literally means you take your capital and your goal is to make more capital, right? I've invested $10,000 in Apple stock and I hope that it generates more money. You take your capital to make more capital, right? We invest to make more money. Investment management, an investment manager should also be looking at your risk tolerance and the timeline that you have for different accounts. So you get the appropriate types of investments for your goals. You should expect that an advisor can talk to you. Always going to want to work with someone that you understand and that you feel like you can trust. So have intuition, like let intuition also be your guide. And I would say too, a misnomer, you don't have to be rich to get a financial plan, all right? I have a client, literally, we spent 1 year together on her financial plan. And she said, Megan, last year at this time, I was very close to filing bankruptcy. This year, I'm sitting here in my new home. Had she chosen to go through, crash courses of credit or bankruptcy, she wouldn't be eligible for a mortgage. And so, yeah, sometimes looking at someone who can put you financially in a better place is Well, I think of the right way to go. All right, finding an investment manager. You're going to want to look at FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. So go to the broker check at finra.org and check out and make sure that your investment manager has licenses, right? We don't want to end up with a Bernie Madoff. The other thing you can do is you can call your state. So if you go to NASAA.org, you can figure out who to call inside your state. Your investment manager should be licensed with the SEC or the state. So go ahead and reach out to both of them. A lot of fraud and scams could be avoided if somebody had picked up and made a 3-minute phone call. Finally, I'd just like to talk about other important papers. Your signed original copy of your will is very important. Someday the letters of testamentary will be important. Your marriage license, your driver's license, your birth certificate, social security card, all your tax returns, past bills, maybe, account numbers and health cards. And also, I have my own obituary written. I like to update it every year. I know that sounds morbid, but in this group, we all know life changes on a dime. So doing some of the preparation ahead of time is very important. It's crucial. So I had a question that came out of last year, and one of the ALS dads asked, what steps can I take now to minimize the work for my spouse? I would say get your financial plan done. Get your estate plan and documents organized. When your wife becomes a widow or when your husband becomes a widower, it's really tough to make important decisions. It doesn't alleviate the fact that you have to make important decisions later, but there's some that maybe you don't have to. That's why I like working with caregivers and patients, because you have that ability to have the tough conversations now, to know that you're in a safe space for a short period of time after your spouse passes. You have some anticipation of what's happening in your financial house. Again, finances don't solve anything, but they certainly help decrease stress. So I can't encourage you anymore to really take a look and get those things done. I had another question. Someone had asked about college planning. And good news, bad news, don't know where you stand as far as your timeline goes, but FAFSA actually looks back 2 years. So for me, my late husband's income was decreased by that point. It just depends whether or not you qualify for FAFSA. And also, I always like to remind people of this: your children's disability stipend and your children's Social Security survivor benefit, when the time comes, does not go on your taxes, right? Who's on your taxes? Mr. and Mrs. are on the taxes, right? It's not children. Children are write-offs as dependents, but anything that they earn doesn't go on your taxes. So don't claim their Social Security benefits on your tax return. It is your individual tax return. Okay. There's just some immediate actions to do when you become a widow and widower. And again, these slide decks, we can send to Inheritance of Hope. This is just a quick list that I made. Make sure you call Social Security and let them know when your loved one has passed away. Make sure you call the life insurance companies and have those checks sent. Reach out to your state attorney and your financial advisor. And I would say at this point, don't call the banks. I do feel like some people are too quick to notify institutions. So don't be too quick. I also question whether or not you should pay all bills, because sometimes medical bills can be negotiated. Sometimes, especially in times of COVID, I know this sounds so strange, but medical bills are in one person's name, and maybe because of COVID, no one was co-signing on them, meaning you're not responsible for these high medical bills. Credit cards. Really find out with your credit cards if you are a joint card holder or an authorized user. So that's a big difference. That's about titling. And why would you call Social Security? Because identity theft. There are some really nefarious people out there that scan obituaries, okay, and they're looking for vulnerable people. Another thing I always say, don't follow your friends and family's advice. You can quickly tell. I had someone tell me I should pay off my mortgage. Well, we had a HAMP loan. I called and I did everything I possibly could to reduce our expenses and to increase our income. Like I'm the grant researcher person and I knew what we were looking at. So I had a HAMP loan and it held our mortgage at 2%. It also, if I was a good payee for the 7 years, then they paid $5,000 towards the premium or towards the balance of my mortgage before it reset to 4%. So your friends and family, they mean well, but they're not financial advisors. So always just tell them, thank you so much. My financial planner and I have discussed that. Thanks so much for your concern. Okay, that's an easy, quick little, possibly white lie, but hopefully you do have a financial advisor. And now we turn it over to you and we'll be with you live. So the advisor and the attorney are in. We are open for questions. I don't think we need to do it in the, maybe we still need to do it in the chat, but we'll turn it over to Inheritance of Hope. Bill, thanks for your time with me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Megan. It was a real pleasure listening to your presentation. I have a whole page of notes. So, yeah.
Likewise. I've loved gathering assets, and don't let the trust or the cost deter you from doing what you know is right. So we encourage all of you to take action, and we're open for questions.